School program is a 2-year program that focuses on civic engagement and public service. We have a 22-hour academic classroom load, a 14-hour public service project commitment, and those programs are enhanced and enriched by a distinguished lecture speaker series coordinated by Patrick Kennedy and Nikolai DePippo. And the bishop today kicks off the spring series. We're doing our best to bring a wide variety of different speakers in a wide variety of disciplines so that our students and our state can experience those opportunities. It's my pleasure now to introduce a person, a good friend of mine, who happens to be a faculty member at UAMS, happens to be a great pediatrician at Arkansas Children's Hospital, where his specialty is infectious diseases. He also happens to be a student at the clinic school where he is pursuing his master's degree in public service. We share many of the same interests, including a commitment to KUAR and KLRE and public radio. And so it is my pleasure to introduce to you one of our students, Dr. Gary Wheeler.
Thank all of you for coming today on behalf of the students and staff and faculty here. It's great to see so many people here for our very interesting guest, and it's my pleasure to introduce her, the presiding bishop, Katharine Schori. We deeply appreciate her coming to the Clinic School in the midst of her very busy schedule. Just a little while ago, she was here to consecrate the newest bishop of Arkansas, the Reverend Larry Benfield. It felt like Pentecost today. I know it wasn't the right season. There's a lot of excitement down there at the event. At any rate, she was here to share with her Arkansas flock. There were an awful lot of Episcopalians that gathered around for this event today. And it happened to be the first consecration that she has done since she became the presiding head of the Episcopal Church in the United States. It should be noted that she is the first woman to hold this position. And what's really interesting, so I said second. Okay. And but anyway, it was really remarkable that she had been the first nominated and was chosen by the group to lead the church. So it's an interesting few months we've had. Just this past week, Nancy Pelosi took over as the first speaker of the House of Representatives in 200 years, and they both share some interesting challenges. The challenges of a church and a nation polarized by conflicts that have really plagued these institutions over the last decade. And both have promised to bring stability and unity back to our political and religious conversations. Our bishop speaker is well trained to do this. She brings a wonderful set of perspectives to her new calling. She has seen the world as an underworld student of oceanography. She attended Oregon State, where she obtained her master's degree working on squids. Is it octopi or octopuses? I'm not sure. She is an academician. She taught at the Good Samaritan School of Theology in Corvallis in Oregon. And along the way, she learned to fly, became a pilot. Perhaps the experience that has given her such a wonderful mile-high view of our cultural landscape in which she now works. She's also a mom of a daughter who is also a pilot in the U.S. Air Force, giving her insights into the role of our military in the world at this time. She's fluent in Spanish, has made a great commitment to ministering to the Hispanic community in Nevada. And like Reverend Benefield here in Arkansas, she is completely committed to those that have the least in our society, the homeless, the imprisoned, and those in poverty. She's been inspired by Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela, as well as by Heisenberg, Bohr, and Einstein, and is eminently qualified to address us today. Our plan is to take about 20 minutes to make some comments on the role of science, creationism, leadership, and other very important concepts that we have been studying here at the Clinic School. After that, we will open the floor for questions.
Actually, maybe more than 2 over here. And there's 1 here, 1 here, and 2 over here. There's still 2 over here. Going once? Okay, there's several over here as well. I just hate to see people standing when their seat's going empty. Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to have a conversation about leadership in the public sphere. And it is going to be a conversation, although I realize I'm expected to prime the pump with some comments ahead of time. And I also discovered once I got to Little Rock that this has been advertised as an address about evolution and creationism. That's not what I came prepared to talk about. But I will comment briefly on science in my remarks, and we can certainly take that up in the discussion at the end. I simply want to applaud the focus of the Clinton School of Public Service on training and educating leaders for global service and in seeking equity for all. Those are great and noble aims, and if leaders are not able and willing to hold out a large and ambitious vision, very little passion or ability will develop to respond or achieve it. This school builds on a heritage of those who have sought to exemplify that kind of lofty mission. We have this week buried another who worked also from a large and ambitious vision. And while Gerald Ford may have had less time in the particular position for which he's remembered, his funeral reminded all of us of the need for healing the many hurts in this world. His act of pardon, most unwelcome at the time, brought this nation healing, and he paid the price for that. Mercy is not altogether a popular virtue, but the compassionate urge toward healing and healing for the whole world is what motivates mercy. That deep sense of righting the wrongs and injustices of this world is needed in ever-increasing abundance. We need creative and compassionate leaders who can help to find healing in Darfur and in the Middle East. We need them today, as we needed them in Ireland and in South Africa in the 80s and 90s. And there will be equally deep need in human communities as the students here move out into this work and leave this place. The search for equity, if we understand that to mean the basic dignity of every human being, underlies many of the world's great religious traditions, especially those with which this part of the world is most familiar. The 3 great Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, seek a broad vision of peace with justice, known as shalom or salam. Judaism embraces the great visions of, among others, the prophet Isaiah, of a banquet spread on a hillside, a city set on a hill to which all the nations will come. And those visions find their specificity in a community where the hungry are fed, the ill healed, prisoners set free, the blind have their sight restored, and the poor hear good news about liberation from oppression. Jesus' first act of public ministry, as reported in Luke's Gospel, is to read from that vision of Isaiah's, and then to say, today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. And as he does that, he claims that vision as his own. And Christians today seek to make that scripture equally into reality. Islam draws its very name from the understanding that peace comes in submission to the will of God, of living in right relationship to God and other human beings. Islam, shalom, and salam all have the same root in a word that means a good deal more than simply peace. That vision of peace with justice, where no one oppresses the poor, where all are able to live at liberty, potential is limited because of unchosen accidents of birth or life, like gender or race or class or disability or illness, that vision lies behind the work of prophetic leaders. Prophetic leaders, which I desperately hope is what this institution is about creating. Prophetic leaders are those who can dream big dreams of a world restored and are willing to challenge the political systems of our day to move toward those dreams. In our own day, that vision of a world restored, a world where the poorest have enough to eat and access to education, health care, and the basic dignities of human life, that vision is exemplified in the Millennium Development Goals. The Millennium Development Goals are a concrete vision of the possible, achievable by the year 2015, and they include some very significant things. Feeding the 1/3 of the world's people who go to bed hungry every night, providing primary education for girls and boys around the world, improving maternal health care, reducing childhood mortality rates, preventing and treating diseases like AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, working toward gender equity and empowering women, ensuring environmentally sustainable development, and building global partnerships for development with a focus on debt relief, aid, and trade. Those frame a bold but achievable vision which challenges all the peoples and governments of this world. If we're going to reach those goals, the developed nations will have to increase their giving to development work. The United States, while generous, gives at a significantly lower percentage of national income than many other industrialized nations. Those large and industrialized nations, together with global financial institutions, will need to continue the good work of international debt relief begun so clearly in the Jubilee year 2000. The developing world, in partnership with others, will need to continue to attend to issues of accountability, transparency, and the misdirection of public resources for private gain. South Africa's Archbishop Ndungane's Africa Monitor Project is a solid approach to those challenges which is just beginning to take shape. The people of this world will need to continue to challenge all of their governments to live up to this bold vision that brings together both developed and developing nations to better the lives of billions of people. The world needs the kind of leadership that can dream big dreams, that can challenge old and inadequate ways, and courageously seek the best for all humanity and indeed all creation. The leaders this school is forming have a significant opportunity to build a more just and equitable world, and it's going to take all of the gifts that they have to offer, and some that you and they may not yet recognize. All great leadership begins in courage. Courage to dream those dreams and to challenge unjust and corrupt systems. That courage will be repeatedly tested and tried, but it does grow stronger when it's exercised. People generally discover that it's much easier to say no the second and third and fourth and fifth times. You students will discover, if you haven't already, that fear usually arises in ignorance. Fear of the unknown person or idea, fear of what is untested or unexplored in yourself, and fear of the future. Most of those fears quail in the face of exploration. The leadership of the students who will emerge from this school and the leadership of all of us will depend on our ability to see connections in unlikely places between people people or ideas that have not yet met, in understanding the interconnected web of life that sustains everything on this planet and perhaps beyond, and the interconnections that John Donne so eloquently phrased as, "No man is an island, entire of itself, but each is connected to the main. So ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee." Every single one of us and our ability to live a full and abundant life is diminished by the failure of our neighbors to thrive. That's true whether the neighbor is a member of our immediate family, or a woman with filariasis in Namibia, a fish slave in Ghana, or a child sold into sex slavery in Cambodia. Their suffering limits human flourishing, yours, mine, and that of all humanity. A deeply grounded sense of compassion, coupled with a grand and global vision, can change this world. My tradition calls that vision the reign of God, or the common meal of God. And while your motivation may not be explicitly grounded in a religious tradition, I think you are here because you seek the betterment of all humanity. I think it's probably appropriate to say something about the religious motivation of leadership, especially in our own day. Like all gifts, it's one that can be misused or used well. At its best, religious motivation leads to the upbuilding of all humanity and all creation, not its diminishment. At its best, such a motivation, rooted in any of the world's great religions, seeks justice and peace and abundant life, ideally for all creatures. At its best, such motivation seeks that vision on behalf of all, rather than some subset of humanity. Beware of religious leaders who are unwilling to serve the greater good, who understand that God loves only some, or that some portion of humanity is not worthy of respect or dignity. That is a hamstrung and limping version of the great dream of shalom, salam, or shanti. As in the great dream of Martin Luther King Jr., we seek a world in which all children can grow and play together, unconcerned by the accidents of birth or life that others see as all-defining. We seek a world where the poor hear good news, the ill are healed, the hungry fed, where prisoners are forgiven, set free, and restored to community, where no one studies war anymore. We seek a world in which the systems that seek to maintain some in servitude or slavery are abolished, where all have the minimal right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but even more, a world where all have the right to full and abundant lives at peace with their neighbors. Achieving a world or a community that is more whole or healthy or healed or even holy, and all of those words come from the same root. Achieving a world that's more closely aligned with that great vision will require partnerships between groups and peoples with similar goals but varying motivations, some religious and some not. The ability to sort out the godly or humane motivations from those that are less than noble is part of the challenge before us all. In some sense, it is the eternal dilemma that faces all social architects. If politics is the art of the possible, or as I like to say, the art of living in community, how can it play an effective and fruitful role in building that just society? In my tradition, we can point to a couple of the sayings of Jesus, who seem to have a very canny understanding of politics. He said, "Be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." And in another place, "The children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the children of light." Political savvy is not a bad thing, and he was clearly urging its development in service of that vision of the reign of God. That word savvy is about knowing. The public service of community building requires knowledge, and knowledge of several kinds. Religious vision and knowledge, what is sometimes called enlightenment, can inspire people to dream dreams and think thoughts that lead them beyond narrow, instinctual self-interest toward a healed world of peace and justice. That kind of knowledge may be ineffable, hard to put into words, but it does create the passion, zeal, and energy that's required to struggle toward that vision. Religious or spiritual knowing is basically about making meaning out of life. Why am I here? How am I meant to live? And the answers usually have something to do with right relationship to God, other human beings, and the rest of creation. There's another vital partner in this quest for knowledge. Understanding the best of recent science is not a luxury. It is essential to building this vision of a healed community. Not only is the scientific method a potential arbiter of narrowly adversarial or competitive visions of reality, it's an important partner to the kind of spiritual knowing that's willing to dream beyond the mechanics of life toward equity, justice, and peace. Science is a way of understanding the workings of this world, whether at the level of quantum physics, ocean currents, or weather systems, or even the dynamics of human beings in community. It's a way of knowing what we have to work with, and it can lead to testable hypotheses about the most effective ways of changing what is. The kind of political work or living in community work that this place is about equipping people to do is a vital piece of changing this world into something that's worthy of our aspirations. That savvy, however, must be a partner joined to the whole of human possibility of which religion speaks, and to the reality and givenness of this world of which science speaks. Without the transcendent, politics can become mere manipulation. Without science, blind. But together, this enterprise can build a more holy, healed, whole world for the benefit of all humanity and all creation. So, if you want to talk about science and creationism, we can do that. Thoughts, responses?
Thank you very much. What we're going to do is ask people to raise their hands. We have some microphones that I have up here so that we can all hear your questions. And we'll go ahead and open the floor if you have a question. Wait for the microphone.
I'd like to hear your comments on the question of science versus creationism.
Well, okay. I'll just jump right in. I understand science is about how the world works and the mechanisms behind the workings of creation. I understand the stories of Genesis about the meaning behind that. I don't see them in conflict. I understand the Genesis stories to be metaphorical, not literal history. They're wonderfully congruent if you begin to understand them that way. Even if you look at the Big Bang Theory, and you read the first story in Genesis about in the beginning there was nothingness, and a wind from God blew over the nothingness, and things began to emerge. I can hear Big Bang out of that. I think it's a sad misunderstanding of both science and religion to say that they're in conflict. And actually a recent misunderstanding. It's a post-enlightenment kind of way of seeing both of those.
There's another question. Go ahead.
My name is Chris Keller. I'm an Episcopal priest. And I've been working for the last 3 years on a dissertation on the relationship between Christian theology and evolutionary science.
Well, maybe you ought to come here.
And I agree with you that we come from a tradition that actually goes way back. I find it even in Augustine and Aquinas that recognizes the way to interpret the Genesis stories need not be, may necessarily not be literal. And so there's ample room for compatibility between Darwin's theory of evolution and Christianity. That's more of a starting point than an ending point. But there are lots of places where the two disciplines, science and theology, potentially do rub against each other. And I was thinking this morning about one in particular that I thought might be a little bit provocative to raise and get your comment on. And it has to do with the definition of science as that is being argued in the courts in relation to the controversy about intelligent design theory and its relatives, whether it can or should be taught in public schools. And a little bit of history in Arkansas in the early 80s, there was a creation science law that was passed by the legislature. The Episcopal Diocese of Arkansas, with the Methodist Church and some other groups, entered as plaintiffs to have that law overturned because of the grounds that it was the establishment of religion. And so that became McLean versus Arkansas, an important Supreme Court decision that continues to define the relationship between religion and science in the public sphere. A more recent decision is in Pennsylvania, Kiss-Miller versus Kohler. That's where the court threw out the school board's policy of requiring that there be a space made for the teaching of intelligent design in the public school classroom. In that decision, the judge gave several reasons why intelligent design theory is not good science, many of which I would say, yes, that's right, that's not good science. But he also added this definition, which is rather important in the court decisions recently, which he says that the scientific definition is one which offers a natural explanation for events in the natural world. That's paraphrasing the quote. And that strikes me as problematic in that it is philosophically difficult to say what nature is, what therefore the differences between the natural and supernatural explanation. And it's problematic in that it rules Darwin's own teachers out of the status of scientists because they were certainly willing to devote supernatural explanations. It seems to me that a better definition is what is testimony. And it seems to me that the Christians like ourselves who aren't committed to a literal interpretation of Scripture and other non-religious people are using this no establishment clause in our Constitution as kind of a hammer to keep bad science out of schools because that's a convenient way to do it. That could lead to some implications that we don't want to accept because there's some interesting questions. Alfred Russel Wallace, Darwin's contemporary, the co-author of Theory of Evolution, disagreed with Darwin about whether the theory of natural selection was capable of explaining human consciousness and mind. That's still an open question, and I think it's one that scientists would be interested in, and that's, quote, supernatural explanations might be kind of within the realm of consideration.
The difficulty with a definition that simply appeals to natural solutions rather than a more traditional understanding of scientific method as something which is based on hypothesis and testability, is that we've seen long history in religion of saying, well, God did it when we don't understand. It's too convenient. It in some sense, robs us or lets us off the hook of needing to use our brains and continuing to grow. I don't think God blessed us with a mind to simply shut off when it comes to certain parts of life. I think we are created as people, as beings who are always in search of greater understanding. That's what the story of Babel is about, in some sense. That is, even in some way, what the second story of Genesis is about, seeking to eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge. That's part of who we are. It's part of our basic structure. And if we're going to appeal to a definition that says, well, you can teach creationism because it is a natural example, we've abdicated our responsibility, both as people who think scientifically and as people who think religiously. There was a piece in the news yesterday about the bookstore at the Grand Canyon run by the National Park Service, and a requirement apparently that comes from high in the government that a book on creationism be sold in that bookstore, despite the admonishment of all scientific consultants to the process. So we've got a ways to go in terms of disestablishing religion.
Another question?
I see a conflict between religion and science when it comes to, say,
Stem cell research? I think religion has something to add to the conversation, something very important about ethics, about respect for human life. But I think people of faith can come to a range of understandings about stem cell research, and clearly have. But I don't think it is necessarily a way of saying, no, you can't do any research at all because it fiddles with the stuff of life. We've been fiddling with the stuff of life since we were created. We have not always done it consciously and carefully. But if there's the potential to heal, I think it has to be respectfully explored.
There's a question on the back. There's a microphone coming back to the gentleman with the glasses.
I was wondering if you might be able to speak to how theology today might gain something from an appreciation of some of the tenets of modern scientific method. I'm thinking particularly of an analogy John Paulkin drew between scientific models and scripture, scientific models illuminating things about the natural order while simultaneously obscuring other elements. Scripture doing the same about our understanding of God or our relationship to God. But that's just an example. How might that, enrich our theology?
Absolutely. In the Middle Ages, theology was called the queen of the sciences, the most important way of going in some sense. I think that's what scriptural interpretation has, that's where it began, out of a scientific mode of looking at the Bible, literary criticism, historical criticism, redaction criticism, ways of looking at the text that went beyond the words themselves, whether in translation or not. I think we always have something to learn in conversation with the rest of the human endeavor. Religion and theology are not meant to be isolated from that. They're meant to be fully engaged in this world we live in all kinds of inquiry. So absolutely.
Oh, there was another question. There's one more question back here, and then we'll have yours. Thanks.
I was one of the lawyers in 1981 in the creation science case, and among the plaintiffs, thankfully, the Methodists and the Jewish community, one or two others, that would suggest the affirming of the separation of state and establishment clause, but some were the other way, and adamantly had maintained a position with regard to inerrancy. And
this in a judgmental way, but sometimes in the need for inflicting further pain in the search for healing. Lancing a boil, for example, undergoing surgery for something that can't be fixed otherwise. Looking at the world around us and understanding in new ways is often painful. It doesn't mean we simply stand in one corner and shout at the people in the other corner and say, you're wrong, you have to change. It means going over there and accompanying people, inviting people into another way of looking at the world. It's challenging, but it only happens relationally. It doesn't happen by lobbing bombs, sending missiles, publishing rhetoric. It happens in the human-to-human interaction. I can't tell you how many people I have heard say, well, I changed my understanding about issues of homosexuality when I discovered that my son was gay or that my neighbor was lesbian. This is somebody I know and love, and it forced me to look at my own assumptions. It's that kind of partnering in the midst of pain that I think the Christian tradition has something important to say about. As a person of faith, I don't think we're meant to ignore the inadequate understandings around us. I think we're meant to invite people into something larger.
Hi.
We have a question.
Yes, I really appreciate your comments about courage and where you're going with that component of faith. Can you give me about yourself in terms of early on when it was tough to have courage or just act? Because it's easier, obviously easier, or is it right?
Well, I'll give you an example. I got my pilot's license in the middle of college in 1972. I didn't use it until I was elected Bishop of Nevada in 2000. And getting back up to speed after, I don't know, that many years of really not doing any flying at all, took some, I had to find some stuff inside to go do that. And, I've noticed over the years since I started flying again that if I don't fly for a while, I have to go digging again for the courage to go down to the airport and unlock the airplane, get in it, and get out there on the taxiway to take off. Frequency has a lot to do with it, tackling it and, having the gumption to go out there and do it again. There's always something challenging about doing things that require courage. Climb a mountain, going backpacking. There's always something unexpected. There's something unknown about it, but that's also, that's where I feel most alive. And I think people who do that kind of thing have an understanding.
We have a question back on our Clinton students.
As a woman in leadership, church leadership, what has been your greatest challenge and how have you met it?
It's been my greatest challenge. It's hard to point to one. But there are small challenges, and they seem large at the time in everyday ministry. Accompanying a family where somebody's died, that's challenging. Dealing with a situation of misconduct as a bishop, where you have to tell a priest that he's got to retire and renounce his orders, because what he did is not okay. They come all the time, and I can't point to just one. Sorry.
You're on the second one.
Could you talk a little bit about the breakaway churches of the Episcopal Church and how that's going to affect your life as presiding bishop? How are you going to deal with this?
Well, there are about 7,200 congregations in the Episcopal Church, and about 30 or 40 have significant numbers of their members who said they want to leave. That's a tiny percentage. They've gotten a lot of press, a lot of recognition of that kind of rejection of the rest of the church. The reality is that we continue to point back to what our mission is as a church, and it is about this vision of healing the world. And if people can't participate in that, then our response really needs to be, well, we will bless your going and hope you find a place where you can be more at home. But if you want to come back, the door's open and the light's on. And if you're going, you have to realize that a congregation doesn't leave the Episcopal Church. People can leave, but the congregation is a creature of the diocese, and the diocese is a creature of the whole church, and that body, as a body, can't leave the institution. Does that help?
I'm Susan Smith, I'm an Episcopal priest. I know you're going to be going to Tanzania next month, and you'll be the only female primate with a bunch of others from around the world. When you think about that meeting, what are the particular leadership skills or attitudes that you think will help you in that meeting and maybe help others of us as we reflect on leadership?
Well, I think anytime we go into an unfamiliar community, that community is not completely unfamiliar to me. I know, 10 or a dozen of the other primates, some of whom I know as reasonably close friends already. I think we have to go expecting to find other human beings, people with whom we can connect at some kind of human level. What makes the primate of Tanzania tick? I hope he'll tell me about his family. I hope he'll tell me about what's brought him to that role in ministry. What the passions are that he has for the work in his own country. What's suffering in Tanzania that needs aid and healing? That's I think where you have to start. Not coming with a preconceived assumption that this is going to be bomb throwing.
There's a question back against the sign.
Hello, my name is Kevin Kim, and I have a question about another very controversial topic, both politically and religious. It has to do with abortion and capital punishment. This summer, I've been sort of grasping at the religious details of both those topics. I read St. Aquinas' Summa Theologica, but I also read Joseph Fletcher's Situation Ethics. They're both completely different perspectives on religious when it comes to those two topics. And I was wondering, as someone who's sort of moved my spiritual journey, I was wondering if you could sort of talk about the religious aspects of those two very controversial topics. I think I have the political arguments down, but the religious, I need a little help on.
Okay. And clearly different religious traditions come to different conclusions about those. The Episcopal Church has said very clearly that we understand abortion as a moral tragedy. It is a tragedy. That said, we don't believe it should be banned. We believe that it's a last course, last option that ought to remain available. We have said also very clearly that we understand capital punishment to be immoral. That it's immoral for the state to end another person's life. We come to those conclusions because there is an understanding that there's some uncertainty about where and when life begins as an organism that's capable of full and separate function. And we are a people who understand the reality of a variety of opinions within our own tradition as well as beyond our tradition, and we're okay with that.
There's a question back.
In one of your previous answers, you talked about preconceived notions and trying to talk to the cherished tradition of separation of church and state in this country. It's from our origins and it's fundamental. And we tend to transfer that onto other cultures. And that, objectively, that might be a good expectation. But to me, can be a flawed part of the way we look at other people. Kind of a preconceived notion that they should be organized, other cultures and nations should reflect our own ways of doing things. That's just the way I look at it. I would be interested in any of your reflections on the limits of that, how that expectation affects what we do in other countries, and how that works and doesn't work.
That's an enormous challenge, and it is a challenge of our season. The issue about church and state, I think we have an opinion by and large, maybe not by and large in this country. We have an opinion in many places in this country that it's inappropriate for the state to promote a particular religion, that leads to unhelpful oppression of other religious groups, for example. At the same time, I think there's part of our role as people of faith or people who seek healing that says we have to understand another person's context. We have to meet that person or that society where it is, and that may be my scientific view coming out and saying I need to understand what's here before I can look at ways in which it might be encouraged to grow into something more. Does that help? Christians can talk about evangelism as a willingness to hear somebody else's story first before they begin to speak good news to that story. You have to know what sort of good news is needed before you can speak it.
No problem. Try to be loud. As an oceanographer, is there anything that your training as an oceanographer that helps shape your, role as a minister, as a bishop?
Fair question. Did you hear that? Good. As an oceanographer, I was trained to look at systems. And oceanographers have to understand biology and geology and chemistry and physics and atmospheric sciences to some degree. You don't investigate one particular organism in isolation. You investigate a squid in the northeastern Pacific as part of a biologic community existing in particular water masses, subjected to currents and weather, and if they live near the bottom, exposed and subjected to interaction with the underlying earth. Human communities are not unlike that. Being able to think in terms of systems, I think is a great asset for all of us. We don't live in an atomized world anymore. We live in a quantum world, in a world of predictabilities, in a chaotic world. We're even bringing different physics to our understanding of how the world functions.
Patrick, there's a question. Yeah, no way.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you keep some balance in your life? A little bit also about your personal life.
Okay.
It's a question about balance in your life.
And rule of life. Okay. As a person of faith, and I probably have been formed more by the Benedictine tradition than any other, as an adult at least. Balance means times of work and study and play. I run pretty regularly, and for me that's a kind of meditation. It is a kind of body prayer. It's a time of focus. That may sound crazy to some of you, but sometime I'd suggest looking at the men who pray at the Western Wall in Jerusalem. They're in motion continually. There there's an ability to let the noise of the mind silence and be quiet when you're in repetitive motion. And the chemistry doesn't hurt either. So that's a very important part of my discipline. On a longer time scale, finding times in the wilderness, going on a backpack trip at least once a year, going hiking as often as I can. That's been one of my challenges in moving to New York. I don't know where to find the wild things. Although people assured me they could show me some wild things. Maintaining connection in a variety of communities, human communities is a piece of that. And the discipline, which I'm not perfect at, of letting the work sit when it needs to sit, and I need to go off and take care of something else. Letting go of it.
We've neglected people in the middle of the pack here. There's a question. If you hold on just for a second. So the question is, what makes you tick? What did your parents do to make you tick?
My parents were both scientists. My father was trained as a physicist in atomic physics, and later moved into solving fisheries problems when I was in graduate school. My mother was trained initially as an English major, comparative literature. When she went back and got a bachelor's in microbiology and then a PhD in virology. So I came out of a family where science was important, but also language. They sent me off to a Roman Catholic girls' school to start first grade when I was 5. A very strict place where we wore uniforms and curtsied to the nuns when they came to the classroom in the morning. And we got grades, numerical grades in things like diction and deportment and penmanship. But also where on feast days we went to school and put on our gym suits and played all day. So wonderful balance of order and freedom. Great joy in the outdoors that my parents gave me as well. Going backpacking was how we spent our summer vacations.
I'll take the liberty of putting here for a question. Can you talk about your relationship with your mathematician husband and how that's working out in this new position?
When we met, I was a graduate student in oceanography working on my doctorate, and my husband was the chair of the mathematics department at Oregon State. We were in separate departments, separate colleges, so you don't have to worry about that. I supported his work, and he supported mine in other ways. And when I was elected bishop in Nevada, he said, well, I've been a professor for 37 years. I can retire. I'm going to. So he finished out the academic year and came to Nevada and has built a new life for himself and continues to be very supportive. He's not here with me this weekend because he's at the annual mathematics meeting in New Orleans, to which he's gone for 40 years or something like that. So we have a shared relationship that's something of a commuter relationship at this point.
There's another question. Let me give you this one.
I like you use the word savvy in your prepared remarks. I'm wondering, from the standpoint of being savvy, if you could give us if you have any ideas or observations or thoughts on how we can draw out and embolden moderate voices of Islam.
I think it begins with befriending. I really do. I think it's a matter of learning to know the Muslims in your own communities, building connections. Islam is basically about peace and justice. All of the world's great religious traditions have their fanatics who seek, to change things in a violent way. And the West has caricaturized Islam as being only about that fanatical fringe. I think it's a about learning more about Islam in your own family and community. It's about inviting in Islamic speakers who will speak about those roots of Islam. I think our discomfort has a lot to do with lack of knowledge. It's fear of the unknown. And it may take our boldness to begin to invite that conversation. I think it's a very, very important issue in our day. Thanks for raising it.
We've got time for about one or two more questions. If there's any. Can you talk real loud from up there?
If you don't mind me speaking to you from on high.
Where are the tablets?
What are your concerns about the proliferation of casino gambling in our country? From your own personal standpoint, and as a leadership of your institution, and including in that the proliferation on Indian reservations, a large part of which took place during the Clinton administration, and that being seen as a tool for economic development for those depressed areas.
Okay, that's a great question. He asked about the proliferation of casino gambling, and especially as it's happened on Indian reservations. Casino gambling, and I lived in Las Vegas the last 6 years. Casino gambling is a mixed blessing. It's an enormous challenge and problem for people who are addicted to gambling. And people who have that addiction, most of them find they can't live in Nevada because it's pervasive. There are slot machines in the grocery stores and the gas stations. That said, it's provided dignified employment for vast numbers of people in a place like Las Vegas. Living wage jobs. Until the housing market went berserk about 2 years ago in Las Vegas, a maid in one of those unionized hotels could raise a family and buy a house in Las Vegas. It has provided employment for immigrants from around the world. The Episcopal Church was resettling Eastern European refugees and African refugees in places like Las Vegas because they could be trained for living wage jobs with limited language skills. A number of Native communities have seen that kind of potential and embraced, casino gambling as a realistic economic possibility. Some Native communities have said, no, we're not interested in this, including the Paiute tribe in northwestern Nevada. They've been very clear in saying, we're not going to use our resources or our land to support this. We find it too destructive. Like many other options and gifts in life, it's got good points and bad points. The reality is that there's gambling in every state of the union. It's not limited to Las Vegas, even though some people see it that way. It's, I don't gamble. I don't like to earn my dollar bills. But some people find it entertaining. I don't completely understand that. I think there is a part of it that preys on the consumerist mentality in this country, and I think that's really sick. It says, come here and win a fortune and, outdo your neighbors. I think that's where the religious community has got something to say about examining the breadth of the impact of this practice. But I don't think it's either wholly bad or wholly good.
We're going to have to stop there. Thank you very much. I know this is not the last words that we're going to hear from you. We will look forward as American citizens to your contributions to the discussions